Here's a draft speech with 4 keynotes on. Let's start with vulnerability written in a style inspired by Brene Brown's authentic, conversational, and storytelling approach. Speech, let's start with vulnerability. Good morning, everyone. Before we dive in, I want to ask a question. When was the last time you felt truly exposed, not physically, but emotionally? The kind of exposure that makes your heart race, your palms sweat, and your inner voice scream, run for cover. Maybe it was when you told someone I love you without knowing how they'd respond. Or when you finally asked for help, admitting you couldn't do it all on your own. When we think about courage, we often imagine acts of heroism, a firefighter rushing into a burning building, a soldier defending their country, or an activist standing up against injustice. These are undeniably courageous acts, but what if I told you that courage isn't always about grand gestures? What if I told you that some of the most courageous moments in our lives are quiet, personal, and deeply vulnerable? Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the willingness to move forward despite fear. And vulnerability, it's the space where courage begins. It's the raw, unguarded moment when you choose to show up, even when there are no guarantees. I think about a time when you took a leap of faith. Maybe you expressed your true feelings to someone, knowing they might not feel the same way. Maybe you stood up in a meeting and shared an idea, fully aware it might be shot down. Or maybe you admitted to a mistake, risking judgment or disappointment. In those moments, you were vulnerable. But you were also courageous. Why vulnerability feels risky. Let's be honest, vulnerability feels risky because it is risky. When we open ourselves up, we expose our fears, our flaws, and our insecurities. We give others the power to judge, reject, or even hurt us. But here's the thing, the alternative to vulnerability is avoidance. It's staying silent when you have something important to say. It's hiding your dreams because failure feels too terrifying. It's keeping people at arm's length because you're afraid of being hurt. Avoidance might feel safer in the short term, but over time it keeps us stuck. It stifles growth, connection, and joy. Vulnerability, on the other hand, is the key to all of those things. The connection between vulnerability and courage. Let's break it down. Courage at its core is about taking action in the face of uncertainty. Vulnerability is about embracing that uncertainty. The two are inseparable. Here's an example. Imagine an artist unveiling their work to the world for the first time. They don't know how people will respond, whether they'll applaud, criticize, or ignore it completely. But the artist shares their work anyway. That's courage in action, fueled by vulnerability. Or think about a leader making a difficult decision without knowing the outcome. They might be criticized or second-guessed, but they make the call because it's the right thing to do. That's vulnerability at play. Every time we choose to act, despite our fears, every time we step into the unknown, we're embodying courage through vulnerability. Misconceptions about courage and vulnerability. One of the biggest misconceptions about vulnerability is that it's a sign of weakness. That idea couldn't be further from the truth. Think about it. Is it weak to admit you don't have all the answers? Or does it take strength to say, I need help? Is it weak to share your feelings knowing they might not be reciprocated? Or does it take incredible bravery to say, this is how I feel? Is it weak to risk failure by pursuing a dream? Or does it take courage to bet on yourself? Courage and vulnerability are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. Everyday acts of courage through vulnerability. You don't have to climb a mountain or win a medal to show courage. Vulnerability is woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. In relationships, it takes courage to say, I'm sorry, I love you, or I need you. It takes vulnerability to have hard conversations, to admit when you're wrong, or to show up as your authentic self. At work, it's vulnerable to raise your hand and share an idea, to give honest feedback, or to admit when you don't know something. But these moments of vulnerability often lead to innovation, growth, and trust. In pursuing dreams, following a dream, whether it's starting a business, writing a book, or learning a new skill, requires vulnerability. You're putting yourself out there, risking failure, and daring to believe in yourself. The rewards of vulnerability is courage. Here's the paradox: while vulnerability feels like the most terrifying thing we can do, it's also the most rewarding. When we choose vulnerability, we unlock stronger connections. Being vulnerable invites others to connect with us on a deeper level. It creates trust and fosters empathy. Personal growth, stepping into discomfort, stretches us. It helps us build resilience, learn from failure, and grow stronger. Authenticity, vulnerability allows us to show up as our true selves. It frees us from the exhausting need to be perfect. Fulfillment, when we take risks and live wholeheartedly, we create a life rich with meaning and purpose. Courage is a practice. The good news is that courage, like a muscle, can be strengthened. Every time you choose vulnerability, you're practicing courage. It doesn't mean the fear goes away. It means you learn to move forward despite it. So start small. Share a thought you've been holding back. Take a risk you've been avoiding. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Because every act of vulnerability is an act of courage. And when we lead with courage, we open the door to connection, growth, and transformation. Closing thought. Vulnerability is the most accurate measure of courage. It's not about being fearless. It's about showing up even when you're scared. So the next time you're faced with a choice, armor up or let yourself be seen. I hope you choose courage. Because when you do, you're not just transforming your own life, you're inspiring others to do the same. Let's start with vulnerability. Let's start with courage in action. This expanded version dives deeper into the risks, rewards, and practical examples of vulnerability as courage. Let me know if you'd like further adjustments. What does it mean to truly connect with someone? Not just exchanging pleasantries or sharing surface level conversations, but to feel that profound sense of understanding, acceptance, and belonging. At its core, connection is the heartbeat of human relationships. It's what we crave as social beings, to feel seen, heard, and valued for who we truly are. But here's the paradox: while we long for connection, many of us struggle to show up as our authentic self. Why? Because being seen requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is uncomfortable. The fear of being seen. Being seen is terrifying because it means exposing parts of ourselves we usually keep hidden. Our flaws, fears, and insecurities, those messy, imperfect parts we'd rather no one notice, feel like risks we can't afford to take. Think about it. How often do you find yourself putting on a mask? Maybe it's the mask of perfection, trying to prove you have everything under control. Or the mask of strength, hiding your struggles because you don't want to appear weak. Or the mask of indifference, pretending you don't care when, deep down, you care a lot. We wear these masks to protect ourselves. But here's the problem: the very thing we use to shield ourselves from judgment is the thing that blocks us from connection. Authenticity, the key to connection. Connection doesn't happen when we're trying to appear perfect. It happens when we're willing to be real. Think about the people you feel closest to. Chances are those relationships were built on moments of honesty, when someone shared their fears, admitted a mistake, or opened up about their struggles. Those moments created trust. They made you feel closer because you saw the real person behind the facade. Now flip the script. How often do you let others see you? Being seen means showing up as your authentic self. It means saying, this is who I am, flaws and all. It's not about oversharing or exposing your deepest secrets to everyone. It's about letting down your guard with the people who matter most, the ones who've earned your trust. When we show up authentically, we invite others to do the same. And that's where true connection begins. The cost of hiding. The decision to hide parts of ourselves might feel safe, but it comes at a cost. When we hide, we rob others of the opportunity to truly know us. We settle for shallow relationships because the real us never shows up. And over time, this disconnect creates loneliness even when we're surrounded by people. Loneliness isn't about being alone, it's about feeling unknown. And the cure for loneliness isn't more people, it's deeper connection. But deep connection requires courage. It requires us to take the risk of being seen. The vulnerability of saying, "Here I am." Being seen starts with 3 powerful words, "Here I am." Here I am with my imperfections and all the ways I don't have it together. Here I am with my hopes and dreams, even if they seem too big or too small. Here I am with my fears and doubts, hoping you'll accept me anyway. Those words are an invitation. They say, I trust you enough to show you the real me. Of course, there's no guarantee how people will respond. Some might judge or misunderstand you. But here's the good news. The people who matter, those who value you for who you are, will lean in. They'll see your vulnerability not as a weakness, but as a sign of strength. And even if someone doesn't respond the way you hoped, you'll know that you showed up. You chose to live authentically, and that alone is a victory. Empathy, the bridge between being seen and connection. When you allow yourself to be seen, something remarkable happens. You create space for empathy. Empathy is the bridge that connects us. It's what happens when someone sees your struggle and says, I get it. I've been there too. But empathy requires vulnerability on both sides. Someone has to go first to share their truth, to say, this is me. And when that happens, it opens the door for the other person to say, this is me too. This mutual exchange is the foundation of trust. It's the glue that holds relationships together, whether they're personal or professional. Practical ways to start being seen. If being seen feels overwhelming, start small. Connection doesn't have to begin with a grand reveal. Here are a few ways to practice. Share a little more. Instead of saying, I'm fine when someone asks how you're doing, offer a bit more. It's been a tough week, but I'm managing opens the door for deeper conversation. Admit when you're struggling, whether it's at work or in a relationship. Saying, I'm not sure or I need help shows humility and builds trust. Be present sometimes. Being seen isn't about sharing, it's about showing up. Put away distractions, listen deeply, and be fully present with the people around you. Celebrate your authenticity, embrace the quirks and imperfections that make you unique. When you own who you are, you inspire others to do the same. The ripple effect of being seen. When you have the courage to be seen, it doesn't just transform your life, it impacts everyone around you. Your vulnerability inspires others to open up. Your authenticity creates a ripple effect, making it easier for others to be themselves. And as more people embrace authenticity, the world becomes a little more compassionate, a little more connected, and a little more real. Being seen is scary, but it's also liberating. It frees you from the exhausting need to perform, to pretend, or to be perfect. It allows you to build relationships based on who you truly are, not who you think you're supposed to be. Closing thought. Connection starts with being seen, and being seen starts with vulnerability. So the next time you're tempted to put on a mask, ask yourself, what would it feel like to show up as my real self? What might I gain by letting others see the real me? Because when you choose to be seen, you open the door to deeper relationships, greater empathy, and a life rich with connection. Let's take that step together. Let's start with being seen. Shame is one of the most isolating emotions we experience as humans. It's that deep, painful feeling that tells us we are flawed, unworthy, or not enough. It's the voice in our head that whispers, if people knew the truth about you, they'd turn away. Shame thrives on silence. It grows stronger when we hide it, when we try to bury it deep within ourselves, hoping no one will notice. But here's the good news: shame, for all its power, has a weakness. Its kryptonite is empathy. Empathy is the antidote to shame. When we bring our shame into the light of connection and understanding, it loses its grip on us. Shame cannot survive empathy, because empathy tells us, you're not alone. I see you. I hear you, and I accept you. The anatomy of shame. To understand why empathy is so powerful, let's first unpack what shame is and how it works. Shame is different from guilt. While guilt says, I did something bad, shame says, I am bad. Guilt is tied to behavior, something external that we can address and correct. Shame, on the other hand, is tied to our identity. It's internal. It feels like a judgment of who we are at our core. Shame tells us we're defective. It convinces us that if others see the truth about us, our mistakes, our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, they will reject us. This fear keeps us silent, and that silence gives shame its power. Why shame thrives in silence. Imagine a secret you've carried for years, one that fills you with shame every time you think about it. Maybe it's a failure or regret or something someone once said to you that made you question your worth. Now, think about how often you've shared that secret with someone else. For most of us, the answer is never. That's because shame creates a cycle of fear and isolation. You feel ashamed. You worry that sharing your shame will lead to rejection. To protect yourself, you stay silent. The silence reinforces the belief that your shame is too terrible to share. This cycle can be exhausting and all-consuming. The longer shame stays in the dark, the more power it gains. But here's the thing about shame, it can only survive in the dark. How empathy breaks the cycle of shame. Empathy is the light that breaks through shame's darkness. When we summon the courage to share our shame with someone we trust, we disrupt the cycle. The act of saying, "This is what I'm struggling with," takes away shame's power. But the magic happens in the response. When someone meets our vulnerability with empathy, with understanding, compassion, and a lack of judgment, shame can no longer thrive. Here's why empathy works. It normalizes our struggles. Empathy reminds us that we're not alone. When someone says, "I've been there too," or "that makes so much sense," it shatters the illusion that we're uniquely broken. It validates our feelings. Empathy doesn't try to fix us or dismiss our emotions. It says, "I hear you and your feelings are valid." This validation helps us feel seen and accepted. It builds connection. Shame isolates us, but empathy reconnects us. It reminds us that we're part of a shared human experience and that our struggles don't define our worth. The courage to be vulnerable. Of course, sharing shame isn't easy. It takes immense courage to say, "Here's the thing I've been hiding." The fear of rejection can feel paralyzing. What if they judge me? What if they don't understand? What if I regret opening up? But here's the truth. The people who matter, the ones who truly care about you, will meet your vulnerability with empathy. They'll listen, they'll validate, and they'll remind you that your shame doesn't define you. Even if you're not ready to share your shame with another person, you can start by practicing self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a friend. Sometimes the first step to breaking shame's hold is learning to give yourself empathy. Empathy in action. Empathy isn't just a one-way street. It's something we can both receive and give. Here's how we can cultivate empathy in our relationships. Listen without judgment when someone shares their shame with you. Resist the urge to fix, dismiss, or judge. Simply listen. Your presence alone can be healing. Respond with validation. Say things like, "That sounds really hard," or "I can see why you'd feel that way." Validation helps people feel understood. Share your own experiences if appropriate. Sharing your own struggles can help the other person feel less alone. But be mindful not to make the conversation about you. Create safe spaces. Foster relationships where vulnerability is welcomed and met with kindness. This makes it easier for others to open up. When we practice empathy, we don't just help others heal, we strengthen our connections and deepen our relationships. The healing power of empathy. One of the most beautiful things about empathy is that it doesn't require perfection. You don't have to have all the answers or say the right thing. What matters is showing up with an open heart and a willingness to be present. Empathy doesn't erase our shame, but it transforms it. It takes the weight of our struggles and distributes it. It reminds us that we're not alone and that we're not beyond love and acceptance. Shame cannot survive empathy because empathy is the opposite of what shame tells us. Shame says you're not enough. Empathy says you are enough exactly as you are. Closing thought. If shame is the voice that isolates us, empathy is the hand that pulls us back into connection. It reminds us that our worth isn't determined by our flaws or mistakes, but by our shared humanity. So the next time you feel shame creeping in or you see someone struggling under its weight, remember this: the antidote is empathy. A simple, heartfelt "me too" can change everything. Let's be brave enough to bring our shame into the light. Let's be kind enough to meet it with empathy, both for ourselves and for others. Because shame cannot survive empathy, and together we can create a world where no one has to face it alone. Living wholeheartedly is about embracing life with an open heart, a willingness to be vulnerable, and a deep commitment to living authentically. It's about showing up as your true self, free from the fear of judgment or perfection, and embracing both the joys and the struggles that come with being human. It's the choice to live fully and intentionally, to be present with yourself and others, and to prioritize connection over comfort. But what does wholehearted living actually look like? And what rewards can we expect when we choose to live this way? Let's explore the transformative power of living wholeheartedly and the incredible benefits it brings. 1. Deeper connection with others. One of the most profound rewards of living wholeheartedly is the ability to connect with others on a deeper level. When you live authentically, you give people permission to do the same. The more you show up as your true self flaws, and all the more likely others are to feel safe doing the same. This creates an environment where vulnerability can thrive and real connection can take place. True connection doesn't happen when we're trying to present a perfect version of ourselves. It happens when we allow ourselves to be seen. And when we do, we create space for others to share their true selves too. Living wholeheartedly allows you to build relationships rooted in honesty, trust, and empathy. You move beyond the superficial and experience the joy of truly knowing and being known by others. These deep connections are the foundation for lasting friendships, fulfilling romantic relationships, and meaningful professional partnerships. 2. Increased self-compassion and acceptance. Living wholeheartedly is a practice in self-acceptance. It's about being kind to yourself, especially when you fall short or make mistakes. Instead of criticizing or judging yourself, you learn to offer the same compassion you would offer a close friend. When you live wholeheartedly, you stop hiding behind perfectionism. You release the need to constantly prove your worth and instead accept that you are enough as you are. This self-compassion allows you to embrace your imperfections, flaws, and vulnerabilities, freeing you from the grip of shame and self-doubt. The reward: a greater sense of peace and confidence in your own skin. You no longer feel the need to be someone you're not. You can rest in the truth that you are worthy of love and belonging, exactly as you are. 3. Authenticity and freedom. Living wholeheartedly brings the reward of authenticity, the ability to show up in the world exactly as you are, without the need to wear a mask or hide behind a false identity. When you choose to live authentically, you stop seeking external validation or approval. You no longer measure your worth by the expectations of others or the standards of society. Instead, you live by your own values and principles, and that creates a sense of freedom. Authenticity frees you from the burden of pretending. It allows you to stop people-pleasing, saying yes when you mean no, and hiding parts of yourself that you believe are unworthy. When you live wholeheartedly, you align your actions with your values, and you stop compromising who you are to fit in. This freedom to be yourself is empowering. It opens up the possibility for deeper, more fulfilling experiences in every area of your life, whether it's your work, your relationships, or your personal growth. 4. Greater resilience in the face of challenges. Living wholeheartedly doesn't mean that life becomes perfect or free of challenges. In fact, it's the opposite. The more you open yourself to life, the more you will encounter moments of discomfort, struggle, and pain. However, living wholeheartedly equips you with the resilience to face these challenges with grace and courage. When you live authentically, you develop a deep sense of self-worth and a connection to your inner strength. You learn that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy, and that it's okay to experience hardship. Living wholeheartedly helps you develop the emotional tools to bounce back after setbacks. You learn to embrace discomfort as part of the growth process and to find meaning in life's challenges. You trust that you can handle whatever comes your way because you know that your value is not determined by your successes or failures, but by your willingness to show up as your true self. 5. A richer, more fulfilling life. When you choose to live wholeheartedly, you experience a richer, more fulfilling life. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to pursue your passions or start a new project. You stop putting your dreams on hold out of fear or insecurity. Instead, you take bold, courageous steps toward the life you want to live, knowing that each step, no matter how small, brings you closer to your true self. Living wholeheartedly allows you to savor the present moment. You become more attuned to the joys of everyday life, whether it's the laughter of a loved one, the beauty of nature, or the satisfaction of doing work that aligns with your purpose. You begin to experience life with a sense of gratitude and wonder. This fulfillment comes from living a life that's true to your values, passions, and desires. It's about making decisions based on what brings you joy, not on what others expect of you. It's about taking the time to nurture your relationships, pursue your interests, and invest in your personal growth. 6. A legacy of courage and vulnerability. The rewards of living wholeheartedly extend beyond our own lives. When we choose to live authentically, we inspire others to do the same. We set an example of courage, vulnerability, and self-acceptance. By living wholeheartedly, you create a ripple effect that touches the people around you. You encourage others to embrace their own imperfections, pursue their dreams, and let go of the fear of judgment. Your authenticity becomes a beacon for others who are struggling to show up as their true selves. And that legacy, it's powerful. It creates a culture of connection, empathy, and courage that transcends generations. It helps build communities where people feel safe to be themselves and where vulnerability is seen as strength, not weakness. Closing thought. Living wholeheartedly is not always easy. It requires vulnerability, courage, and the willingness to show up in the world as your true self. But the rewards are immeasurable. When you live wholeheartedly, you unlock deeper connections, greater self-compassion, a life of authenticity, and the resilience to face whatever challenges come your way. You create a life that is rich with meaning, fulfillment, and purpose. And the most beautiful part, the rewards don't just benefit you. They benefit everyone you come in contact with. By choosing to live wholeheartedly, you make the world a little brighter, a little more compassionate, and a little more real. So take a deep breath and commit to living wholeheartedly. Your life is waiting to be fully experienced. As we come to the close of this journey together, let's remember that living wholeheartedly isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, being real, and embracing life with all its messiness and beauty. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable, to let go of fear, and to connect with others in ways that are authentic and meaningful. The rewards of living wholeheartedly, deeper connections, a life of authenticity, and the strength to face challenges are within your reach. It's not an overnight transformation, but a daily choice to step into your truth, to show up with love for yourself and others, and to choose to be seen. So I leave you with this live fully, live authentically, and never underestimate the power of your presence. The world needs your whole heart just as it is. And when you step into that truth, you'll find a life that's richer, fuller, and more connected than you could ever imagine. Thank you for the courage to listen, to reflect, and to be a part of this journey today. May we all have the strength to live wholeheartedly and create lives filled with meaning, connection, and love. Thank you.